Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to be with you today and share some perspectives on how we see mobility in the future. I'm thankful to Dipanshu and ETAuto for giving me the opportunity to share with you a recent report that we put out relating to the future of mobility. When we speak of the future of mobility, I think it would be doing a great injustice to the topic of discussion if we just focused on technology, and therefore, whenever we speak of the future of mobility, we tend to speak about uh, the whole, because our belief is the industry structure is due to undergo significant changes because of what we are seeing in the areas of technology, in the area of business models and so forth. So in this presentation, I would attempt to touch upon each one of these things, significant drivers that will cause change and who are going to be impacted, and how will perhaps the future supply chain look at, and what can be the economic value that can get captured by the industry. So as was said, I'll run through this presentation for about 35 minutes or so, and then they take questions at the end of it. Uh, as you will understand, this is a general purpose presentation. This is based on what we understand of the industry and what feedback we get from our clients that we serve around the world. And therefore, you kindly take this as one version of the truth and not necessarily the only version. And therefore, please use our conclusions judiciously. And it has to be looked at in your context, and it need not always work in all contexts. The second thing that I want to share with you is this report is largely based on data about the US market. While it is still a very significant, gives directionally what is likely to happen to the industry and demonstrates the changes that will happen. It doesn't always reflect what will happen in the global automotive industry. So that is something that you need to pay some attention to. Before I jump into the future, I just thought I'll take 30 seconds to talk about the present. One of the important questions that everybody has in the automotive industry is how do the demand conditions look like at any point of time. I just thought I'll share with you one graphic which probably will be useful for you to do things today and tomorrow. That is, what is the demand driver? In our opinion, the most significant demand driver is the net per capita disposable income growth. That is the growth of per capita disposable income over the growth of inflation. As you can see, whenever the inflation growth has been high and the net per capita disposable income growth has not been beyond, let's say, 4.5%, 5%, the demand for automobiles have actually been quite low. And what we are seeing currently is a condition which somewhat resembles the second half of the last decade, which is when we had significant growth. So one would like to look at some of those good old days coming back. You also need to look at it in the context of domestic saving levels, which dropped down to almost 20, 24, 25% from 30 to 33%, going back to high 20s and low 30s, which means people have bumped up their household savings, and they are now in a position to go back and invest in the market, which should be good for the entire industry. But this is just to set our mood light. So I'll jump back to our topic on hand, namely the future of mobility. Before I just get into the future itself, I want to touch upon a couple of sort of megatrends that we are seeing, which significantly impact how the industry will evolve. There was a time when most organizations were vertically integrated standalone corporations, self-contained corporations, as you can see in the graphic on the left, where a single set of owners had control over several activities in the value chain that existed. And over the last really 7 to 10 years, there has been a lot of anxiety around the pace of innovation, and areas where innovation was taking place, increasingly companies were coming to the conclusion that the time they were taking to produce new products was far greater than the time for which the product was being sold in the market. The depreciation or attrition of new products was so high that they had to think of newer ways of innovation and new product development and things like that. And thanks to the convergence of technologies, not one vertically integrated organization had all the know-how to develop new products, because such new development was taking place outside of their areas of core competence. And therefore, today what we are seeing across the board is what increasingly we are calling ecosystems. And the leaders and CEOs are interested in the influence they have on their innovation ecosystem or the business ecosystem, as opposed to going out and saying, I own so much of asset, or I have an R&D of 500 people or 1,000 people or whatever. So this is an important aspect which some of us notice quite vividly in our industries. And automotive industry has been, quite frankly, quite open to this, and and has collaborated across the board for a while, and therefore you would be able to recognize this. But this transition from vertically integrated organizations to ecosystems is perhaps one big basis on which the future of automotive industry is going to rest upon. And how does this work? It is a virtual sort of a collaboration, getting together of people. It is not always through mergers and acquisitions, which looks like the old economy, old world kind of a structure. And by having completely apparently unconnected people coming and working together, they are able to envisage and deliver new value that one single organization was never able to envisage and deliver. And in a structure like this, it is quite common to see companies that are competitors who are also collaborators in innovating and discovering new things. Case in point, in the automotive world would be increasingly companies collaborate to buy engines from competitors who otherwise are dealt with in the marketplace through product offerings and things like that. So as simplistic as it seems, this is a very powerful construct on which the future mobility's industry will rest on, and therefore I thought I would take a moment to describe this to you. There are some interesting examples. I have one in front of you where companies that are from completely different industry sectors get together for a common purpose, and they have nothing to do with each other in terms of shareholding and so forth, but they have one single purpose at a point of time for which they collaborate. And similarly, organizations are getting together along with public laboratories and things like that. And more interestingly, automotive OEMs, tier 1 suppliers globally are increasingly resorting to crowdsourcing or maker movement kind of innovation models in their own organizations. I'm aware of one of the top 5 OEMs who had a maker movement within their own organization and seem to have filed about 50 patents in a very short period of time. So this sort of destruction of the conventional method of looking at an organization has a far-reaching implication on the manner in which the future of mobility will evolve. As you can see, like I said, these collaborations look at making money clearly, and more importantly, they look at giving customers the value that the customer himself or herself did not think was possible, because the customer also thinks within the definition of the industry structures they are used to. And most importantly, these collaborations tend to look at social changes as a big agenda, as opposed to just looking at what can be the valuations and what can be the profits at the end of the day. Again, kindly remember the point number 3, which again we'll come back to as we go along in this discussion. All of us know, there are these technologies which are creating a lot of disruption. The powertrain maturing, the lightweighting of materials, advances in connected vehicles, and also the slowdown or the delay in the purchase of the first car. And apparently, in several countries, we are talking about a 10-year delay or the time at which the first car is purchased by youngsters. And also, all of these we know. One thought that keeps coming up all the time is all of this will slow down, particularly the powertrain technologies will slow down because we have the oil prices that have become extremely low, and therefore there is no motivation on the part of OEMs and tier suppliers to look at any of these technologies, be lightweighting, be alternate powertrains and things like that. While up to a point it looked like a reasonable argument, sometime in the December of 2015 with the UN Conference of Parties Agreement, where we all countries got together and agreed on a 2 degrees centigrade increase over a period of time, it is no longer about the price of oil or the crude oil that will determine the pace at which this change will happen. I think it has only made it even more imminent and even more urgent for organizations to look at these technologies in combination to be able to achieve the kind of emissions that are expected of countries. You might know that between 2013 and 2030 we expect an economic growth of almost 85-90% and the emission growth of about 8%. And in 2014, for the first time in 40-45 years or so, the emission was actually flat when the economies around the world grew at 3% or so, which is a significant statement that we are making. And therefore, this is probably going to be a far bigger driver than the price of oil. And therefore, the pace at which changes will occur with reference to drivetrain or lightweighting will be quite relentless. And I don't think we are looking at a situation where things would slow down because oil sells at a lower price. Now, there are 2-3 things that I have tried to establish. One, there is a shift from vertically integrated organizations to network of organizations or ecosystems of organizations. The second thing that I want to submit to you is that the pace at which the industry sector will look at change will not slow down. In fact, it will get faster because there are other pressures that are playing on the manufacturers to make them shift to more friendly technologies. And when these two forces play out, let's also look at what is at stake. What is at stake if you look at the broad automotive value chain is $2 trillion of sale every year. And when you talk about automotive, you should not just stop with OEMs and suppliers, but the entire ecosystem which benefits from sale of cars and sale of trucks and motorcycles and so forth. It is about 11.5–12% of the US GDP. And if you take India, it's probably about 7 or 8% or so. And when what is 3 million cars today becomes 7 million cars, it is a fairly large chunk of economic value, number of jobs that are at stake, and this is an important factor when we talk about the future of mobility. I mean, there is so much invested in the sector, and therefore there is likely to be some resistance to change on the part of those who have made those investments over a period of time. And to that extent, we believe there will be uneven emergence of newer models, and the current organizations that are invested in the present model of the automotive sector, they would ideally like to have the change happen in a slow manner, in a sort of linear and a sequential manner, which they believe they will control. Whether it will happen or not, we'll talk about that. But this is reality. I mean, there is so much of value at stake, and therefore people who have invested in this economic value are likely to be jumping up and down to make disruptive changes in a rush. And therefore, we think there are two profoundly different views of the future. Like I said, there will be the insider view or the current incumbents view of the industry, and they would like this to evolve naturally, incrementally. And if you look at what the current OEMs are doing or the tier suppliers are doing, they are investing in incremental technology. Whereas if you look at the disruptors, the Googles and Apples and so forth, they have the view that there is probably a tipping point after which the change can be dramatic and disruptive, and they see a social benefit coming out of the change that will that they think they will cause to happen. And by the way, they have no stake in the game so far. It's not these organizations that have invested in the assets that the automotive industry and the other constituent stakeholders have in the industry. Therefore, they have they have nothing to lose and everything to gain by disrupting. And they would, in an ideal world, want this change to be dramatic, disruptive, and immediate. Therefore, the reality is that we will have to find out is who's going to have what kind of influence as we go forward in the future. And the disruptors typically tend to think of a situation where vehicles hardly crash. There are no traffic jams. The energy demand drops significantly because of autonomous vehicles. The trip cost might be having you shortly. And in a world where infrastructure build-out is becoming prohibitively expensive, and most large economies today do not have the cash to invest in infrastructure, they take the view that if we make the technologies use the current infrastructure more efficiently, then the economies do not need to invest in infrastructure. That is something that they find attractive. And also, a large parts of developed economy, large areas of cities in developed economies are used for parking lots. And I have some estimates of that. And what happens when those large areas get converted into economically productive spaces? I mean, that's something that they see as a social value. And when you are talking about significant autonomous traffic on the road, you can also imagine the category of policing, which is today called traffic policing, becomes meaningless. And look at the economic value that can get released because of that. So that is the view that they tend to take. And the insider view is, can we make it in a deliberate manner? Can we make one thing at a time, and so forth? So because of the heterogeneous nature of the markets, the nature in which infrastructure is laid out in different parts of even developed markets, we believe the current and future players will have to deal with, at least for the next couple of decades, more or less all the 4 states that will coexist in some shape or form. Probably starting from the next 5 to 10 years, some of these will be fairly acute, some of these will be somewhat muted, but most organizations will be required to deal with the 4 realities. As you can see in the graphic, the quadrant 1 is somewhat similar to what we have, but changing incrementally. And the second quadrant is what we already today, which is the world of car sharing. The third is the driverless revolution, and then the fourth is, of course, the accessible autonomy, where it is sharing of vehicles, but those vehicles are not owned by individuals. So the ownership shifts from personal to shared. So our belief, based on what we understand from executives of organizations, is for quite some time to come, both the disruptors and the incumbents will be required to deal with these 4 states of the future of mobility in some shape or form. And we believe there is a probable point of inflection. Is it going to be in 15 years or 20 years? We are not able to put a number. After which the change to something like accessible autonomy is going to increase quite significantly. But till that point, there is going to be a slow process of evolution with all the 4 states existing. Now, what is also true is, if you will remember the stakeholders that I presented to you a couple of pages back, some of those stakeholders become somewhat irrelevant to the future of mobility, and there will be new stakeholders who will want to monetize the assets and the transactions that get created in each one of these quadrants, or each one of these stages of mobility. People who will want to monetize data, which, as you can imagine, there will be a fair amount of data that will get generated. People will want to monetize the ability to run large pools and large populations of vehicles. And is there going to be an operating system which will run for all of these? And is there a monetization opportunity for that? So that is the kind of questions that will get answered in the future. And clearly, in both state 3 and state 4, there will be a lot of vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure kind of technologies that will emerge, which will bring in to the automotive ecosystem new players that do not exist in the automotive ecosystem today. We believe, if you were to take the current structure of close to $1 that we spend per mile, this is based on depreciation of technology, vehicle finance, fuel, insurance, maintenance, cost of the hired driver, or the cost of the driver owner, and also the ride-sharing profits in different scenarios. We believe over a period of time, it can go to about a third of the cost that we incur today. In that phase, when we talk about $0.3 a mile, we're talking about 2 people pods as opposed to what we see as conventional cars. And the current utilization of personal automobiles today, as you know, is less than 5%, 4% give or take. And therefore, if we are even talking about 4% becoming 40, 50, 60%, which is what that age of mobility is likely to result in, we're talking about significant value that gets generated just because of far lower cost of depreciation per mile that you drive. And what is not included as economic value in this calculation is, like I said, about 30% of commercial areas of large cities is parking lots. And there is one estimate which I think Massachusetts Institute has made, that the parking lot space is 4 times the number of cars in the US. And that is a significant number. And 2, if you take the wasted hours and if you put an economic value at $12 today, that is the kind of wage that you get paid per hour, and 460, 470 hours that people waste waiting in traffic, waiting for parking lots and so forth. There are 200, 210 million licensed drivers in the US. We're talking about close to $1 trillion of economic value that can get released. And similarly, if you were to go on the basis that each autonomous car will replace 4 personal cars, again, at roughly $8,500 US in a year, you're talking about close to $1.7, $1.8 trillion. So roughly just those 2, time wasted and the lesser number of cars, would mean somewhere in the ballpark of $3 trillion of value that is available to be used. How much of that will get captured is another matter, but these are the kind of numbers the disruptors would be talking about as they talk about a future of mobility in their own definition. Now, as we can all understand, there will be both forces that will delay things and also forces that will accelerate things. Clearly, the regulation, technology is pretty much proven. I think the technology capabilities are well within reach, but public attitudes, the readiness of the governments and regulations are big issues. And there is a paranoia about privacy and security as more and more decision making gets out of the individual human hand to IT systems and telecommunication. There is fear of catastrophe happening on the roads, and therefore that is something that can potentially come in the way of the future state in a sense. And with all of this, what kind of valuations will these startups and tech companies get is something that will determine the pace of adoption of new mobility models. Because some of these are almost like, for a long time they would not see profits and valuation, but overnight it can create a significant value for the inventor. And Tesla, for example, is a model, an example in that area. So, and lastly, this is going to change the employment of people. I mean, we all know that Uber in the last couple of years, in 2014, hired drove maybe about multiple million kilometers. And what happens when the autonomous cars that would impinge upon the pace of adoption. And I probably come to the last page on this presentation. Consequent to all of what I said, there will be shift of importance and shift of value in the value chain of the automotive sector. The OEMs, which currently have twice as much capacity as the production, what will happen to them is something that we will have to worry about. The insurance companies, which are perhaps very profitable in the current auto supply chains, will have to not deal with individuals, but what happens to the central systems failing, and therefore their business model can completely get disrupted. And you will have, like I said earlier on, tech companies which will come into being, which will want to create and sell operating systems or experience software for experience, be it entertainment, infotainment, and also companies that are in analytics and cognitive analytics at that, which can and will want to use data that will constantly get generated as people are driving their vehicles. And we believe something like long-haul cargo transport, which currently apparently has about 30,000 drivers short and high attrition of drivers and things like that, could be the starting point for the future mobility, as opposed to what we commonly believe will occur in the private transportation. So there's more of this that is presented here. I mean, there are data points which talk about how the accidents can today about 40,000 lives that are lost in the United States, which can come down to a small fraction, and that number is much worldwide. I think the global figure is about 1.24 million people that are killed in road accidents and so forth. That can come down to a small fraction, and you can pack more cars and the roads. All of us know that, and therefore, you are talking about far less consumption of fuel and things like that. But all of that said and done, when mobility, as we know, happened in the early part of 20th century, it actually connected up people, resources, connected up markets, it connected up buyers and sellers, connected up producers and consumers. And therefore, there was the ability to create and capture value. Now, we do not know if all of the possibilities that we have because of the future models of mobility, what will it happen, what will it mean in real economic terms, and what is the value that we will create, and that will determine how much of the value that is potentially available will get captured by organizations that are in the automotive value chain. Let me stop here. I know I've taken about 35 minutes or so let me stop here and see if you have any questions. And thank you for your patience and listening. I have a question which says, what is your take on the future of mobility in the commercial vehicle industry space in India? Uh, as I referred to a little while back, in a future where uh, mobility is shared and autonomous, I think there is a great opportunity for commercial, you know, cargo transportation to adopt these technologies. But if you were to look at commercial vehicles in India, I think there are models that are emerging which are in the nature of ride sharing. Again, it builds on the basis that the utilization of commercial vehicles is pretty low, and the number of running hours is pretty low. And the second problem is there is one driver to a commercial vehicle, and therefore the utility or the utilization of the commercial vehicle is limited to the number of hours that the driver can drive. So I am aware of a few startups which seem to be addressing that. They're trying to source drivers independent of vehicles, and they are also looking at ride sharing equivalent, so that the backhaul is within an organization for return load, but with a wider participation of players who are not necessarily your direct collaborators in a sense. You are bringing to bear the power of information, which means that the backhaul possibilities are much higher. And I know for a fact that some of these companies are already serving pretty large organizations in India. So that is one future state I'm able to see now, and it will only get probably even more evolved as we go along. The other thing that I personally work with quite a bit is how can we capture the performance of not just commercial vehicles but even off the road, earth movers and things like that. And if you were to take the view that there are 20-30 billion dollar companies which have, let's say, 30, 40, 50,000 earth movers and trucks and large commercial vehicles which are sitting in the remotest part of the world, and if you're able to do condition monitoring of some of the critical parts, and it has an impact of, let's say, 0.5% of the maintenance cost, and you're able to centrally plan predictive maintenance, it seems to be causing significant impact on the inventory holding and the ability to turn around vehicles and ensure uptime in a big way. And they're also now charging customers by per ton of earth excavated, as opposed to selling them directly or leasing them through a lease finance company, and they seem to be doing quite well in that model. I serve a couple of these global organizations which have so many sensors and have the ability to aggregate data in a central point, and they're able to do inventory planning, pricing for services by the customer, and so forth. So long answer, but these are interesting possibilities that I'm able to see. I have what, according to you, are the top 3 ADA solutions uh, which find good potential market in the PV industry. What, according to you, are the top 3 ADAS solutions which find good potential market in Indian PV industry? I do not want to make a comment on a specific technology or a product, so I probably want to skip that. We can speak offline. I'm sure ETAuto will be happy to share with you my contact. Whatever I can say, on a private basis, I'm happy to share that. There is a Mr. Damde who has asked this question. We could do this offline. There is a question: what kind of mobility solutions do you envisage in emerging markets? Um, I would probably believe for a fair bit of time to come, we are likely to see solutions which are somewhat shared and not necessarily into driverless technologies. Not because the driverless or autonomous technologies are not available, but because the underlying infrastructure is probably not ready enough for accepting those technologies. So we will probably see two sort of states in that. One is when we have these driverless technologies being popular in campus situations. It can be in a township, or it can be in an airport, or anything where the infrastructure is of a certain level. And on a common basis, we probably will require us not to it'll probably prohibit organizations and countries from adopting driverless technology. So I would believe a lot of onboard technologies will improve, safety and collision avoidance and infotainment, etc. But uh, pure driverless technologies probably are a little away from emerging markets as things stand. Again, we do not know how fast these things can change, and like I said, it can start with campus applications, but uh, we are probably going to be behind the more developed countries. What are the possibilities of trickle-down effect for mass car segment customers when it comes to autonomous cars, um, connected ecosystems, and computer-controlled driver uh, driver environments on Indian roads? Like I said a little while earlier, I think there will be a lot of infotainment connectedness that we are already seeing, and we should continue to see in a far more sophisticated manner. Where it will perhaps stop is when we talk about autonomy or being driverless and things like that. Again, the auto industry has shown for sure that what starts off as a luxury offering very quickly comes to the uh, to the common cars and the mass segment cars. That is something that will continue quite relentlessly, and therefore, the need for organizations to be able to quickly amortize those costs and or make them available in a manner in an open system for adoption by a larger population of cars is going to be a very critical requirement as it relates to new technologies and things like that. There is Mr. Vijaya Kannan. What are the key skills required for being relevant in the market 10, 20 years down the line? Again, as what is it as an individual or as someone who runs an organization? I think there are a couple of things that I would say. Knowing fully well, it may not answer all the dimensions. As an organization, the important skill is how are we able to influence a larger ecosystem, as opposed to trying to build all skills within a particular organization. Uh, if you look at automobiles as they evolve, I think we will increasingly start on the basis of software and middleware and not necessarily on the hardware. I mean, it's somewhat like what will happen, what has happened already to the PCs and laptops and things like that. And therefore, a lot of new product innovation, new product development will happen because of skills not resident in the conventional automobile industry, but it will have to come from outside. And to that extent, we may have to embrace a convergence of technologies like, computing and sensor technologies, which partly is owned and understood by the automotive industry, but equally it is sitting still with the technology definition of industry. Telecom, as to how we are going to deal with telecom, because the cars are, the trucks are likely to get more and more connected, and we do not want situations where when you're crossing a busy road, your computer is buffering, and that can be catastrophic. And therefore, you know, as a CEO or a leader of an organization, even of an organization which is a tier supplier to a large OEM, the important thing would be to see how much we are able to influence an ecosystem, or what influence we have over a large, innovation ecosystem. Again, the argument that is often made in India is, look, we are all, to some extent, subcontractors. The business model has been invented in Japan, Germany, or just go and work with some of those set or predefined suppliers and partners and so forth, which is an argument. But if you want to be an innovative and someone who captures the value at the top end, being influential in the ecosystem is something that is important. As an individual, I would believe, some of the jobs don't go away. I mean, you still have to have, even in the future of 40 years from now, you still will have some sort of manufacturing that will take place. The manufacturing models may change, but there will be manufacturing which will still take place, and therefore people who are in manufacturing engineering, people who are in industrial engineering, or any of those things, or people who are operating control systems within a factory become far more important. The conventional supervisory, I'm standing there on the shop floor, I'm overseeing what 15 people are doing in my bay. That would be a kind of a job that can get threatened, not in the distant future, but in the immediate future. So, and again, someone who's got an understanding of innovation, who has been in the innovation sort of space, I think has great opportunities going forward. It can be innovation in the area of materials. I mean, if you take automotive, what are the big items that they're looking at? Powertrain, lightweighting, and electronic telecommunication to come and sit on an automobile. So if there are people who are experts in that area, I think there will be terrific opportunities for them. And therefore, we will probably find someone who otherwise worked in a pure telecom company, being an inherent part of an automobile company, and so forth. So that's really how I would look at it, as opportunities for individuals. There is another question. What is your view on disruption in manufacturing activity in Asia due to these trends of mobility? I'm not able to fully open this. I'm sorry, I'm not able to read out this gentleman's name, but I think there are a couple of things that are happening around us because of the new technologies. What is competitiveness is probably undergoing some significant changes. Last year, or early part of this year, we did a survey of about 500 to 600 global company CEOs, including some of them in India, and what they are ranking as competitive countries for manufacturing include Japan and UK. Till very recently, we all thought Japan is an old country, doesn't have enough number of people, it is a high-cost country, therefore you cannot realistically manufacture anything. UK again has really no manufacturing ecosystem, and it is more into services and things like that. But what we are increasingly finding out is what defines competitiveness is not just low labor cost and not anymore access to feedstock. I mean, the feedstock question has probably been settled for some time to come. And therefore, increasingly organizations are looking at where is it that I can get my products and services innovated faster than any other place. And therefore, the new competitive places or countries are turning out to be where there are innovation ecosystems. It can be Ireland, it can be Israel, for products that they probably will not consume in large numbers in those countries themselves. So to that extent, there is a certain amount of disruption that is taking place already. And uh, because of 5 years back, because of what is happening to shale and things like that, when investments in China slowed down, manufacturing investments did not come to India, but they went back to Mexico and places close to the US, which they call reshoring. And therefore, it is not as if uh, low labor cost is the only basis on which manufacturing competitiveness is looked at, and to that extent, there is a certain amount of disruption that is already taking place in Asia as it relates to manufacturing. There is another question. This comes from Mr. Amol, and he asks, is the shift in mobility preferences only a developed market phenomena? Are developing countries still considering car buying? Again, what is mobility preferences? I think clearly some empirical evidence, right? I mean, we know that in the US, for example, or Europe, with so much of public transport and ride sharing that is available, the youngsters who used to buy their first used car, maybe when they are 17, 18, or 19, are not buying them anymore, and they're using zip cars and things like that. And the first-time buyers' age seems to be more in 30s than 20 or less than 20. Clearly, that is not the case in China and India for two reasons. One, we are becoming an affluent economies, and therefore it still is important for young people to show their success in terms of having a car and things like that. That said, increasingly we also find that in countries like China and India, smartphones and Facebook friends, these are more important than driving a new car. And given the state of our infrastructure, particularly as it relates to traffic and parking, there will be a time when households will consume less number of cars. Multi-car households will consume not multiple cars, probably end up with one. And give it another 5, 6, 10 years, I don't know what is the right number, but the age at which we buy cars will also probably start going down, and that demand for cars will shift to the rideshare companies like someone has mentioned, Ola and Uber and things like that. There is another question. It says the Uber and Ola has increased the traffic in metros. You mentioned about traffic being streamlined. Is congestion likely to come down? I was talking about congestion coming down and traffic being streamlined in the future when we have autonomous vehicles, when the organization of traffic is not left to individual drivers but to the IT systems that are resident not just in the cars but also in a central central traffic regulation kind of a system. I think today the data would suggest that the best roads we have an utilization of not more than 40% or so. So there is not just in India, across the world. India is probably a little more than that. Therefore, there is potential to pack more number of more amount of traffic in the existing infrastructure. Now, that is not going to happen in the current definition of automobiles, it has got to have a lot more of technology. Some of those technologies are already happening. We are looking at the traffic signals which are connected to sensors, and they are linked to predictive analytics, and therefore the timing of the lights is dependent on the real life situation, as opposed to every 60 seconds or every 120 seconds. That helps up to a point, but when autonomous cars are on the roads, then we are talking about a much larger impact in the volume of traffic that can be carried on the roads. So, when I say there is a potential to reduce traffic problems, it is not with the current technologies. It is something that will happen when, in its purest form, when the end state of autonomous mobility happens. This technology manufacturers for future mobility, how ready we are, uh, is the shift in mobility preferences only a developed market phenomenon? I think some of these things, these technologies are core to the current day automobile. So therefore, for some time to come, the braking systems or the suspension systems, some of those will not change at all. Like I said, there will be a tipping point where the size and shape of the automobile itself will change quite substantially. I mean, we do not have parts today, and so long as we do not have an alternate, method of transporting people, we are probably going to have the current form of automobiles. Clearly, lightweighting will happen, and but the conventional skills, conventional methods will continue. Will it continue for 10 years, 15 years? One doesn't know. But at a point when we are able to increasingly look at autonomy in automobiles, that is when you will have new forms of vehicles that will come into being. There, it becomes a completely different story. But there again, there will be parts that have to be manufactured. It can be of plastic, it can be of light metals, but there is a manufacturing process that it will have to go through. So those technologies will, those processes will stay. What will also happen is there is likely to be a very high level of customization that each one of these mediums of transportation will want to offer to its customers. So while the basics will be common, on the software and middleware side, there will be a fair amount of personalization that will take place, which can be probably happening not just within the auto component manufacturers, let's say factory. It can happen with the larger community of app developers. It can happen with a system integrator who is a supplier to the pod manufacturer or the larger ecosystem manufacturer. The other thing that I would also say is, we should start looking at mobility as end-to-end. There are some cities, for example, in Japan, which are looking at a single ticket for you to ride a train, get into a bus, and also take a ride-shared car to the last mile. That kind of a model will also make changes to, how to answer an earlier question. It will also, sort of address issues relating to when will people want to buy cars. Because if you have the facility of seamlessness, then there is that much less enthusiasm to go and buy a car. If I can go from my house to a rail station, from the rail station to an airport, and fly out of the city without having to buy 2-3 tickets or changes and so forth, then it makes far more sense for me to use that end-to-end mobility than to have an individual car. So some of those things will also change the manner in which traffic gets looked at, who buys when, etc. So that's something that I just wanted to add to an earlier question. In the Indian context, there is another question. Mr. Ramashankar, I think. In the Indian context of having CVs and two-wheelers as major road users and also the ones involved in road accidents, what is the outlook of autonomous driving and the impact and its impact on avoiding road deaths as a major value? Again, I'm not very sure if it's something that will happen in the next 5 years or so, but clearly there are technologies which are in the nature of vehicle-to-vehicle communication, vehicle-to-infrastructure communication that can be ported onto individual vehicles, which can, cut down on collisions. And so that is on the technology side. But more importantly, what I would expect is increasingly, as we collate data from onboard computers and onboard sensors, you can have situations where an individual actually pays the insurance premium based on the style of driving. So if my sensors constantly sense high acceleration and sudden braking and deep, a certain amount of steering turns and things like that, you can dynamically tell the insurance company that you are covering a very aggressive driver, and therefore I may end up paying multiple times the kind of premium that a much safer driver would pay. And if you go extend that logic, and if you go on the basis that vehicle performance on the road can be tracked by law enforcement authorities, speeding can easily be controlled. I mean, as and when someone speeds, you can generate a ticket and slap a fine on that individual without having to have a policeman stand and wave his arms at you. And some of those enabling technologies, which are not necessarily related directly to the driving of the vehicle, can substantially take care of the safety of the vehicles in the current context. I mean, as automobiles exist today. Like I said, when they become autonomous, clearly the story that we're talking about is entirely different.